Hello everybody and welcome back. I'm excited to get started with our new project, which as you know is going to be dealing with 4 different techniques. Uh, Crosshatch, hatching, continuous tone, and stippling, little drawing methods that we use. It's also an opportunity for you to learn how to enlarge. We're working with a grid and we can learn this technique of enlarging if you've got a photographer, and this is very applicable to like muralists use this technique. So it's kind of like 2 little lessons in 1. We're learning about use of the grid as well as these 4 techniques that we're going to be using to develop our drawing at the end. So most of you are aware of the little preliminary steps that I showed on my little PowerPoint previously. So we'll probably be spending this evening doing those preliminary steps. Of course, you're going to go ahead and lay down your grid on your actual drawing initially. And once you get done with that, you will be creating a 16 by 20 grid on your good quality drawing paper, and then you'll be moving on to creating your first the contour line drawing of the object. So as I mentioned in my little PowerPoint, and I talked to you earlier this evening, you can start down in the corner, just follow your map on your grid. See, okay, where does this line start? We're looking to just follow lines, the outside contour line shape of each of these shapes. My initial first step is to just follow along and establish where this first exterior line is. So now I've got the shape that I've got to contain all the other shapes within. So at that point, you just start looking, counting squares over and say, what's inside this shape? 1, 2, 3, what's inside this shape? And look at these little shapes and if they will coordinate with your drawing. So I know that we'll spend probably this first session just getting through these steps here. I want to spend a little time here and demonstrate for you how to develop each one of these little techniques. So I'm going to probably do about 4 little modules here. I'll have my talented cameraman zoom in so you can watch as I develop these, and I'll try to get through it relatively quickly. I won't just have plenty of time this evening to go ahead and start going through all these other preliminary steps. So with that said, let me get set up and put up my easel. And now one thing that I want to make sure to emphasize is do not draw your lines this dark. The goal here is to make this whole grid disappear, the lines. It's just they're going to be defined by the actual tonal qualities that you use or techniques that you use. So do not, I repeat, do not work this dark when you're initially laying out your grid and your contour lines. Try to work as light as possible so that all of these little construction lines will disappear in the process. I'd like to talk a little bit about tools. It'll behoove you to have a number of very sharp pencils. Here's your General 314, our popular one that we use in class, but you can have some other just regular number 2 pencils, but just make them sharp. It's good to have a whole bunch of them sharpened up, especially when we're doing the stippling technique. You want them to be nice little dots, not little chicken scratches, right? Also, when we're working up our hatching and cross hatching, we don't want real dull, thick lines on there. Of course, you'll want to have your drawing stumps, your blending stumps as well. Have those handy. And a nice eraser. I always like to use this one. My kneaded eraser is just my kind of go-to eraser. It doesn't leave any debris when you're erasing, correcting your marks. So with that, I'm going to have my good buddy Kai zoom in, and I'm just going to see my hands as I work up these different areas, and we'll get through this together. So, can you see me, Kai?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All good.
Okay, I'm going to start up here in this little module right here. I'm going to start off with continuous tone. We have all already worked with this when we were doing our chiaroscuro, and So just be sensitive to the light areas and the dark areas. I'm probably going to go establish my darkest darks first. There's a dark shape across the eye. When we get into drawing faces, which will be our next project after this one, and we switch to charcoal, I'll talk about this little shadow that falls over the eye and the iris. So I'm just going to very carefully work up the darks. I'm going to leave a little highlight there, a little glint in his pupil. So this is pretty dark. I'm going to go ahead and get real rich with that dark, and this is his eyelashes that are coming across here, and that pupil is actually really pretty dark. It's just almost black. And that comes all the way over into here now. I've got this deep dark shadow shape. Well, it's actually the module above it. I'm working right down in here. So I'm going to be dealing with these shadow shapes. Notice that all I have is the general contour line of the ridge of the nose. All of these shadows, shapes, and these subtle little value contrasts, I'm just going to work up with it, developing my tones. So let me keep this handy so I can see where I'm at. This kind of goes all the way over into, falls into shadow down in the corner recess of his eye socket. I personally like to, when I'm doing the eyes, I like to use the continuous tone because eyes are so fluid and they're so the windows of the soul, right? You want to do as beautiful and detailed a job as you can on that, on those ones. So I'm going to use the continuous tone on this one, and I will also do continuous tone where this other eye is. As I explained in the directions earlier, you cannot, if I do continuous tone here, the one above it has to be another technique. I'm going to do stippling up here. Another technique over here. I'm going to move down here and probably do hatching. I'll move over to cross hatching here, and I'm not sure about that one now, but I'm going to leave that one. You can work diagonally. I'm going to do continuous tone here, and I'm going to reserve that for continuous tone as well. So let me keep working here. Now I've got this shadow shape that's coming down and defining the edge of that nose. It comes all the way down here to the flare of his nostril. And I'm just looking at all of these little shapes. Some of them fade out subtly afterwards, but they're just, look at these as little shapes onto themselves. There's a dark shape there up in the corner of his eye. His nose, there's a kind of a core shadow that happens right up to the ridge of the nose. And subtly fades away a little bit as it comes out onto his, towards his cheek area. I'm going to go ahead and establish again where my darkest darks is. The nostril opening here is pretty dark. And how does that little shape look? Are you zoomed in tight, Kai?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'll have you know my good buddy here, good long-term friend, a wonderful artist in his own right, is risking life and limb to come help during the this catastrophe we're having right now. But he's all masked up. You can't see him, but he's wearing a hazmat suit.
Not true, guys.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put some value on that iris there. Guys, we're gonna have plenty of time to work on this project. I haven't quite figured out the exact due date yet, but this is a rather labor-intensive project. It takes a lot of time to develop it correctly, so I want to take plenty of time on this. Seems that this shadow comes out just a little bit further here. I'll go back in here with my stump and smooth things out and make this look really I want to get this part, the continuous tone parts, as close to photorealistic as possible. Again, I just like to have fun doing eyeballs, eyes, because just they create such intense interest. There is a very, very, very light value. I'll probably wait and leave that for my drawing, build that up with my drawing stump. So let's see, down here, believe it or not, there is subtle shadow in this area out in here. It looks just empty right now, as does the white of his eye. There's little subtle value contrast. This project is going to really help you develop your eye and your sensitivity to subtle value changes and contrasts. See just a little bit of a flare down that side of that eye. A nice sharp pencil, again, is mandatory for this project. You want to be able to just slowly work these up. I just let the surface of my pencils glide across the surface of that paper and let the tooth of the paper gently pull that medium off the end of the pencil and develop that eye. Let me take my drawing stump and let's see if I can get things a little richer in here. The bottom of your iris, the lower part of your iris, catches light as well, so be careful not to get that too dark so that you don't lose the life that is in the eye. Okay, now I'm going to use just a little bit of value that I've got on the end of my stump from I grabbed and I kind of darkened this and enriched this dark. That's going to actually do two things. It's going to smooth out and make that real nice and rich. And it's also going to put a little bit of graphite on the end of my pencil, on the end of my stump, where I can use that to distribute light value in some other areas as well. See, the flare of his nostril is in shadow. Okay, I'm just barely touching the surface and laying this stump over on its side, so I'm actually using this surface instead of the point to very carefully pull a little bit of subtle value out into this area. It may look like it's in full light, but it's got some subtle value on there as well. Coming carefully up to the edge of my line where the grid module is, so be careful not to overshoot your grid. I have any Tom Petty fans in my group? Probably not. Okay, let's see where else. There's another little shadow just at the tip of his nose. It comes over. Where's my, oh, there it is. I'll be careful not to go into my other module next to it, so I'm staying enclosed. It's hard for you to see because this is such a light drawing. And again, I want you to really be conscientious about making your grid very, very as light as you can make it to where you can still see it. And then again, same thing with your initial contour drawing line so that it doesn't get too dark too fast. Okay, let's see what else is going on. Is over here there's just a little bit of subtle value on his. So we see the actual ridge of his nose coming down to the tip of his nose. But I see there's just a little tiny bit of subtle value right down into this area. You guys, you're all going to come out with beautiful drawings. This process is almost foolproof. You're going to be so proud of this drawing after it's done, because again, it takes a lot of time, but it's just something you just kind of zen out, enjoy the experience, get yourself a cup of coffee, get yourself a glass of water, whatever, just make yourself comfortable. Don't drink too much coffee, you'll start shaking and it'll goof everything up. But okay, I gotta tell somebody not to talk to me right now. Jay, I can't talk right now, I'm doing a video. But it's funny, I put the phone out in my other room so I wouldn't be disturbed with that again. Would you go put that away, please? Thank you. Okay, going back to work here. Sorry for that interruption. I'm going to go ahead and soften that value right there. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so I pretty much, let's see here. Oh, no, that shadow comes all the way down here and down to that very corner of that module. Little bit of the core coming right up on that side of that nose. Okay, I think that I'm going to go ahead and call that good for now. Of course, I'm going to be coming back in and making adjustments later, but I'm not going to spend all my time getting this absolutely perfect. Let me move on to another technique up here. Let's go above this eye. The next module above, I think I'm going to do in a stippling technique. So here again, you want to have a very, very sharp pencil, and your 314 is a good one for this because it makes really dark, rich dots. It may help you to kind of define where those interior shapes of lights and darks are. This pretty dominant dark shadow here. Of course, I've got this little contour outline, but I want to know where it comes across and ties in with this eyelid. So, oops. Okay, this is where, don't get in a hurry, you guys. Stippling, you build up the value by slowly kind of, what I'll do oftentimes is just define where all the little dots are. This darkest area, I'm going to kind of go around the outside edge of that darkest area. And then I can move a little faster. I'm going to have a long way to go. This is really dark and rich, this whole little shape that I'm building up right now. I've done a few illustration jobs where I was asked to use this technique, and of course, when you usually work this is generally known as well as the cross hatching and hatching, are primarily ink drawing techniques. I like to do it in graphite to introduce it to the students because it's a little more forgiving. Once using ink, you don't have a choice but to keep going with. Once you've made your mark, it's there. Whereas here, we can erase. Now, erasing the stippling is a little tricky. But you just work it up, and I'm going to get that whole shape that has that rich, dark shape. Kind of go around the perimeter. Then I can just be a little quicker and faster on the field, on the interior part of this. And work that up. Of course, the closer your dots together, and as you build up more and more dots, the darker the shape is going to become. And you can almost get all the way to total black. Just keep building it up slowly, slowly, slowly. Let me see, that goes all the way down into here, right up to the edge of his bridge of his nose. So there. As I sent around a notice to you guys for the duration of this semester, I would like you to be prepared to go ahead and draw during our normal class period, and I'm going to be doing the same. So I'm going to be developing this whole picture of Tom Petty along with you while you're all working on your projects. So we can kind of intermingle with each other and have exchanges, maybe a screen share. You can show me how yours is coming along. Let me see. Okay, where's some other? So there's some very subtle changes. This is the top of his nose, and this is the brow line right here. And there's a very, very subtle shadow shape. Where does that go to? It goes on, I look up in here, it kind of comes up to this little corner of this module. Right there. And comes across just above this line here. So I'm just going to use my little dots, kind of track where that subtle shadow shape is going to be developed. Kind of comes up over here. Off that eyebrow and kind of comes over to that area. So I'm looking at that real subtle shape right across the bridge of his nose. And now I'm going to want to be a little more careful in working that up. Very specifically placed dots. You don't want it to get dark. This is where, when you're working on a dark shape, you can work pretty quick because you're trying to bring it up in value to a pretty dark shape. But we also want to be sensitive to these very subtle value changes. And those ones you have to be a little more careful. Just be patient. kind of bounce around. Once I've kind of defined where that shape is with a little line of dots, then I just kind of bounce around out here in the field and place them. And then subtly add a little dot by dot in between to kind of define that shape. Okay, it's looking a little darker over on here, so I'm going to very carefully go in there and just put some little dots in between the dots, which is going to increase the density, make it just very subtly a little bit darker over at this side of that shape. Don't get in a hurry, you guys. We've got plenty of time. I'll allow us plenty of time to develop these, and I want you guys to all to have a wonderful portfolio piece when you're finished with this. What you want to try to do is match the value transitioning from one module into the other. Of course, you're going to have this little change of appearance by using the different techniques, but you can still try to aim to overall match the value from as you transition from one module to the other and transition from one technique into the other. Okay, where else do we have some value? There's very, very subtle stuff going on down in here. Okay, I think that feels pretty good for me right now. I'll try to get a real close in. How well is this showing up, Kai? Good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's see, where am I going from here? Let me go down to this little module below. I'll start off with the hatching technique. So I can see right down here in this lower corner of the module, it's really, really dark. So I'm just going to start hatching, as you know, I explained before, is just putting parallel lines very, very close to each other. Okay. You can see that there's, of course, that very dark corner down in there. Now we got this other shadow shape that's coming across and coming down towards the corner of his mouth. Again, I look at where does this shadow shape start in relationship to the top of that module. I can see it starts right up about there and comes down to about here. So I may go ahead and just, so I know where I'm going, maybe just kind of give myself a very light outline so I know where I'm working within. Okay, so I know I don't want to get as dark as I've gotten this one, so now I'm going to just start and spread my lines a little further across from each other so they're not as try to be careful with your marks, you guys. Work slowly and exercise control of that pencil tip. Try not to get sloppy. Don't get in a hurry. When we get in a hurry, we get sloppy and then it doesn't look beautiful like I know that it can look. And again, this doesn't take any real particular innate talent. All of you, I guarantee, will come out with a beautiful, beautiful drawing if you just take your time, be patient. What else have we got to do? We're stuck at home, right, for the next 2 months. So we're just going to relax and take our time. Okay, I see another little cast shadow shape coming down that's cast off of the tip of his nose. So where does that start? I'm going to just very carefully give myself that. It kind of comes down here and defines just across the top of the barrel of his mouth. That's pretty dark, not quite as dark as over here. Maybe it starts off that way, so I'm just going to go ahead and okay. There's also some very, very, very subtle values. I kind of dragged a little bit over here. Okay, in the corner of his mouth is his top lip. Come right down the little line of that module edge there. Okay, I've completed this module. Let me go ahead and build this up just a little darker. Hatch line by hatch line to Okay, we can see that little bit of reflected light now shining up on the other underside of the nostril on that continuous tone section above it. So we've done stippling, we've done continuous tone, we've done hatching. Let's move over here, deal with his mouth, the rest of his mouth, and I'm going to do this with cross hatching. There's a lot of dark shapes in there. It's predominantly a dark, these upper lips in shadow, and it's pretty dark, so I want to use the cross hatching technique for this one. I'll start with the darkest dark part first. Let's see, do I have those teeth quite right? I don't think I've got those teeth quite right yet. Make a little bit of an adjustment here. That line, his teeth are a little bit lower, I believe. Okay. So with the cross hatch, I'm going to go diagonally on this one a little bit. So first going to work my way across, just going to build it up with some hatching. Just to define the dark shape there. And then I'll come back and work the other direction and really build up that dark. So now I'm going to come just work in the opposite direction I was just working. You can see very quickly brings up the density. That shape's almost pitch black, so you want to make these little hatch marks very close to each other so you can build up that rich dark shape. Okay, I'm not going to put any hatching right on the teeth yet. I'm going to go up and define. There's just a little bit of a darker shadow where the top lip folds underneath and meets his teeth. So I'm going to go ahead and define where that shape resides, just so I can work within a little area. This top part of his lip is a little bit lighter, but so again, I'm going to go ahead and start with light hash marks. Going one direction. Okay, my pencil's beginning to get a little bit sharper. I know all of you will have your sanding pad handy, so make sure to keep your tools sharp. Okay, now I'm going to go back. I'm not going to get quite as dense as I did down here below his teeth. It's not quite as dark a shadow up there. Okay, let's go ahead and get this area where the light is coming down on the top of his lips. So now I'm going to go ahead and space those top lines, my first pass with the hatch lines, pretty far away from each other. So I'm giving myself room to keep it a lighter value than where it folds underneath to his teeth. Once I'm done with all these initial shapes, I can go back and adjust them. And get close to the end of the demonstration here. I know this is not the most exciting thing for you to sit there and watch this because it takes time. It is a rather laborious and slow process, but maybe just add a few little hash marks here to transition from the lighter part. Now that I'm looking at it, I want to get this whole area down in here darker, the opening of his mouth. That is through cross hatching. That's hatching on that side. Make sure you keep track of which technique you're using in which module, so you don't sneak into the one next to you. Make another quick pass across here. That nice and dark. So I forgot to look at the clock to see how long we've been working at this point, but about 42 minutes. So you can see it's slow, but it moves along pretty quick. So yeah, probably, I mean, I've got a lot of areas covered, so we're going to be working on this project for quite a few days. Again, I'm going to figure out what is our schedule and when I want to assign a due date on this. But in the meantime, you guys, we got plenty to start with this evening. Again, most of you will be laying down your grid on your paper, very lightly, of course. Get the grid onto your drawing, and just be very careful about following and starting at one point. You can kind of go around the exterior, get that line established, and then start going in and working your way out. So again, I can like to start in the middle and work our way out. We're not going to extend past the actual form itself. I'm going to talk about putting a background on later once we get to the very end of this project. So that'll do it for now, gang. I'm going to be talking with you online from this point forward. So get your pencils all sharpened up, get everything together, and we'll see you online. Thank you.